Hello fellow adventurers and travelers from other worlds. Before we begin today, please don't forget to hit the like button and ring the bell to stay updated on my future content. Today I'm excited to be going over a build and team composition guide for using Jean as a main DPS, focusing on physical damage. So first off, let's list some of the pros and cons of using Jean as your main DPS. On the pro side, she has high personal and party survivability, with a high base defense stat and the healing from her elemental burst. She has great single target focus damage, making her excellent at shredding high HP pools like on bosses. She's a very good controller for single enemies and small clumps of enemies and mobs, and her elemental skill has a low cooldown of 5 seconds, and her ult recharges very frequently due to her second passive of Let the Wind Lead. On the con side, Jean has lower mobility compared to other DPSs in the game, such as Chen, who is able to get around quite easily through the use of her elemental skill. Jean has a very high skill floor for the control aspects of her kit, namely her charged attack and her elemental skill, which can result in a significant loss of DPS if used incorrectly. Jean is also weaker at defeating large groups of enemies through AoE DPS, as most of her DPS is physical, and this is in comparison to, again, other DPSs such as possibly Child, again, Kaching, Diluc, etc. Jean also has a low base attack for a 5-star character, which does result in lower raw damage numbers. So at the end of the day, Jean is sacrificing a bit of the top-end damage numbers and the ability to dish out a lot of AoE elemental damage to mobs, but in return you have a very skill-satisfying play experience with excellent crowd control and superior durability, and as we'll demonstrate in this video, the ability to shred single-target health pools very, very effectively. So now let's talk a little bit about why we are choosing physical damage versus straight attack percentage focus or an animo damage focus for Jean. And this comes down to the strategic theory of what each member of your party composition's role is. In this case, your primary damage dealer, Jean, which in gaming terms we call the DPS, or damage per second, of course fills the role of dishing out as much damage over time as possible. In most cases in Genshin Impact, your primary damage dealer, or main DPS, is going to spend the most time on the battlefield when compared to your other party members. Because Jean will be on the battlefield most of the time as our main DPS, she will be using her basic attack chain very frequently compared to her other abilities, and her basic attack chain deals physical damage. Compared to other physical damage DPSers, she is also filling the role of healer and controller on our team, so she doubly needs to spend as much time as possible on the battlefield. She does not have any built-in elemental buffs to her basic attacks from her own kit, like someone like Kaching or Diluc, for example, where they will sometimes wish to build towards elemental damage and synergies as a DPS. Thus, we can commit as much extra physical damage as possible to the build. So now we're just going to go quickly over the attributes and abilities of my Jean here. As you can see, she's maxed at level 90, though what I'm covering today won't require you to be level 90 ascended. You can really start going down this path once you've unlocked her second passive talent, Let the Wind Lead, which refunds 20% of the total energy cost of her elemental burst, which is her heal. As you can see here, I have 0 constellations for her so far, so everything demonstrated will also be completely applicable to a C0 Jean. Moving on to talents, your basic attack will be your first priority to level up when building physical damage on Jean. I have mine currently crowned at level 10 max. The scaling on her charge attack is very high and it has a quick animation sequence, including sprint cancelling tech for mobility purposes. Her charge attack is the meat of this build's damage, so you want to level it as fast as possible. Focus first on getting all 3 of her talents to at least level 6 though first, and then from there, I would prioritize Dandelion Breeze after her basic attack, then Gale Blade last. Gale Blade is primarily a control and utility skill here, rather than a necessary source of burst damage, and Dandelion Breeze is a very key piece to the insane survivability required to keep the auto-attack chains rolling. On to weapons now. If you own the Aquila Favonia, it will be the best for this build. The 5-star sword gives you a massive attack boost, and its unique passive effect gives you fantastic durability to tank through even the most massive attacks, allowing you not only to survive, but at times also avoid interrupting your attack chains. The extra burst damage is also significant, and the AoE helps against mobs. After the Aquila Favonia, I would first recommend the Black Sword, and then the Prototype Rancor in that order. The Black Sword's additional crit rate helps you hit some minimal thresholds for crit rates, and gives you breathing room on your artifact substats while farming. Its passive gives us a big boost to our auto attack chains, and the extra healing gives some great added durability. The Prototype is available as free to play though, and has a higher base attack than the Black Sword, and also gives us the physical damage secondary stat, like the Aquila Favonia, and its passive effect approximates its 5-star cousin's attack boosting passive. And now the fun part, artifacts. Overall, I recommend a 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry and a 2-piece Gladiator's Finale for this build. The physical damage bonus from Bloodstained Chivalry passive helps us to get over 120 physical damage bonus here. For your Sand slot, look for attack percentage. For your Goblet slot, you will need physical damage. And for your Circlet, look for crit damage. With Aquila Favonia, or Prototype, physical damage Goblet, and crit damage Circlet together all maxed, we already reach over 120% physical damage and over 60% crit damage before artifact substats. From here, look for crit chance substats to put you to around at least 33% crit rate, and crit damage you want to be at least around double that or higher when combined with the helm. As you can see, I currently have 34% crit chance and 160% crit damage. My charged attacks will hit like a truck. After crit stats, attack percentage should be the third focus. HP percent is the most preferable of the defensive stats, as Jean's base defense is actually quite high. Energy recharge is always a great bonus, but not as necessary as on a support build. Her second passive talent helps to recharge her ult already, and you will charge her ult faster from orbs and particles when Jean collects them while active on the battlefield. Avoid flat stats wherever possible, though of course use your own judgment. If you find, say, an artifact that rolls 7 to 10% crit rate and 15 to 20% crit damage, but also flat defense and flat HP, that artifact will still serve you quite well if you get good rolls on the crit rate and crit damage. Next, we're going to go over some combat tips, particularly to do with Jean's auto attack chain, which consists of 5 attacks, with the scaling of each attack higher than the last. Her first 3 swings are relatively quick, but the wind-up and full animations of her 4th and 5th hits are quite time-consuming and have bad recovery time. I don't recommend ever using the last 2 hits, especially the 5th hit. This is because the last swing will knock back smaller enemies from you, wasting time moving back to them, and also because the nature of the animations give larger windows for enemies to land hits back on you, potentially crowd-controlling you out of your attack chain. Such as when a large mid-attrial knocks you backward or staggers you. Jean's best attack chain is 3 attacks into a charged attack, and then repeat. In a typical boss burn phase, I will perform the following. Notice here how I'm able to weave in her Gale Blade between 2 of her attack chains for a perfect timing between the 5-second cooldown of her skill. While this is the core attack chain, you will need to mix in sprint cancels for dodging, or use your ultimate for invulnerability frames, or in some cases switch to other characters to make use of their abilities. More on this in team compositions later on. Once staggered, certain large enemies can be effectively stun-locked by a combination of Jean's abilities, such as the Lawachurl here. The chain is simply to use 1 normal attack into a charged attack and then repeat. If the target is not immediately CC'd into the air, Gale Blade will very often knock the target back, staggering them for extra CC, so that you can re-engage with the same chain of normal attack, charged attack. And finally, onto the second piece of the core of this build that I am flavorfully calling the Giant Slayer, as Beidou is the core support character for the compositions I will be going over next. This is for a number of reasons. Beidou's elemental burst synergizes extremely well with Jean, whose attack chain can trigger the lightning frequently for extra damage. Her burst also applies significant damage reduction and resistance to interruption, which is key to keeping up our attack chain. Her skill Tide Collar has a low cooldown of 7.5 seconds, and a long hold duration, which provides great defensive utility in tight spots, especially against massive attacks or CC heavy attacks, such as when the Cryo Whopper Flower is pelting you with its missiles. Tide Collar's max counter is among the highest scaling single burst abilities in the game as well, without the need to set up an elemental reaction beforehand. Tide Collar, again, is also a cleanse ability, which is great for leyline disorders and other debuffs you need to remove in higher level content, such as in the Spiral Abyss or in certain domains. The Electro element she provides also helps you to trigger Superconduct when paired with a Cryo teammate, aiding in Jean's physical DPS. Being a Claymore user is useful for breaking geoshields and farming ore in open world. And lastly, the Electro plus Greatsword is effective against cryo shields in place of pyro reactions, as we'll be demonstrating in one of the showcases to come. I'll speak very briefly about Beidou's Constellations as well, as the first two in particular are very powerful additions to the build. The first one adds an actual damage absorption effect to the shield provided by her Stormbreaker, her Elemental Burst. This is in addition to the damage reduction granted by it as well. Her second constellation also makes it so that the lightning that triggers off of the attacks jumps to additional targets, which greatly increases DPS and also gives AoE to help shore up that deficiency with Jean's DPS style. For weapons on Beidou, I recommend the Prototype Archaic if you don't have any of the 5-star weapons available to use, as the attack percentage will greatly boost her Tide Collar damage and her ultimate Stormbreaker damage while acting as an aura around Jean. Other than that, I highly recommend going for one of the Energy Recharge Greatswords to help recharge your ult faster. As you'll see a little bit later on, I opt for Electro Resonance in a lot of my builds, so I find the extra energy recharge not necessary, as I typically fill her meter very quickly. I won't go into great detail about Beidou's artifacts here, other than to say that I run a 4-piece Noblesse on her. This is to increase Stormbreaker's damage while it's active on Jean, as well as to provide the 20% attack boost from its other passive. Beidou's ult recharge time is typically pretty low, so you will have very frequent uptime on that 20% attack boost from the Noblesse passive. Alright, let's talk quickly about food options. The Tianchu meat is going to be the bread and butter of the food options you want to go for. Physical damage bonus up by 45% and crit rate up by 10% will be the best choice for physical damage Jean. The other option, of course, is the classic 5-star Adeptus' Temptation. Just all around attack, boost, and crit rate is always good as well. Now for the really fun part that I know you've all been waiting for, I'm going to demonstrate and showcase a few different team compositions that I like to run when I use Jean as a physical damage DPS primary. Beidou will features the core support in each of these teams, so I won't touch on her very much as we already have, but I will give a bit of commentary on the other character choices as well as the combat strategy that's being employed. So first up is a team I used to use frequently when I was still new to the game. I was lucky to get Jean very early on off of a chance summon randomly, and Beidou was only days following that. For a long time after that, my core team is what you see here before you. The great thing about this team comp in particular is that by patch 1.3 it will be completely free to play, besides Jean of course, as Beidou will be joining as a free to play selectable character via one of the events. So with this composition, the Electro Resonance from Fischl and Beidou allows both of their ultimates to recharge very quickly, which is especially useful for using Beidou's Stormbreaker and keeping the uptime on that very high. Golba and Oz, Zhangling, and Fischl's elemental skills need no babysitting, and it's quick to switch into them, activate them, and switch back out to keep Jean on the field frequently. Golba Pepper also provides the attack buff for Jean of 10%. Beidou is, of course, Beidou. And lastly, the weapon variety of this team gives you great coverage. Beidou's Greatsword is perfect for breaking down Geo Shields and Cryo Shields, and Fischl's Archery is able to hit weak points on Rune Guards and Hunters, or just provide ranged DPS where needed. The next party composition I'm going to show you incorporates both Zhongli and Mona into the party, along with Jean and Beidou. The important thing I'm going to highlight, though, is Zhongli specifically and what he provides for the party. Incorporating Zhongli here is all about trying to leverage the extra shielding from his elemental skill, which also doubles up on an anti-interruption effect to allow Jean to continue her auto-attack chains uninhibited. Here, both Zhongli and Mona bursts are extremely good crowd control as well against all enemy types, and they require little active time on the part of both characters, again allowing Jean to stay on the battlefield. Zhongli is extremely good at stripping geoshields as well, if that's what you're looking for, with both his skill and his burst, which would normally be hurdles for Jean to work around. Beidou takes just a bit longer with her greatsword to be able to crush through those. Zhongli's shield is also getting a buff in 1.3 to provide additional physical resistance shred on enemies, thus enhancing Jean's physical DPS even further. A downside to this kind of composition is it does require 3 different 5-star characters if we're including Mona, which does also include a promotional character in Zhongli, who has an unknown return date, so if you missed out on him, this unfortunately might not work for you. Another downside is that this party is including 2 non-reactive elements, which does restrict elemental combinations that might be possible or necessary for the content you are facing. Adding Mona to the party works very well for single target burst compositions because of the sheer power of her elemental burst. It has incredible scaling on the damage, but also the Omen debuff increases Jean's damage for a short duration against afflicted enemies. She's currently one of my favorites to pair with Jean, along with Beidou, in this kind of party composition ever since I pulled her. Here we take a look at the comparisons between damage with and without the Omen debuff applied. The last composition that I want to show you guys is Jean, Fischl, Mona, and Beidou. Here we get the double Electro for the resonance for extra recharge on ultimates, letting us keep up Beidou's ult more frequently, and we get the large damage spike from Mona's elemental burst, along with the CC provided by her taunt. Consistent Electro charge is also available to us to help provide extra AoE DPS. Notice here how the combination of Beidou's greatsword and the Superconduct reaction is still doing plenty fine versus the Cryo shields. In a moment here, we'll see a clear spike in Jean's charge attack crit damage triggered by the Noblesse passive off Beidou's burst. I'll quickly now go over some other team combinations involving Superconduct. I'll be honest, I've had a dream team composition in mind for a long time, but it requires Ganyu, and unfortunately the 7 have deemed me unworthy of the Coco Goat. The rest of my crowd roster is almost non-existent, so I can't really show much gameplay. It pains me to talk about Superconduct compositions because the Coco Goat won't come home. I'm not salty at all. But I digress. Chi-Chi allows her extra healing, making you virtually unkillable, although she doesn't provide Cryo as reliably as other options when you need to break Electro shields. Diona can fill the Archer's spot, and provides another shield and some additional heals as well. I strongly recommend avoiding Chongyun, as his elemental skill is anti-synergy with Jean's physical damage, as changing the damage type of her attacks to Cryo means she loses all of her physical damage bonuses. Kaya is a nice free-to-play option and plays well with his aura, and his skill is quick to cast and rotate him out. In the past, I've also paired both he and Zhang Ling alongside Beidou for a sort of triple aura style composition. Thank you for watching this video guide on my Giant Slayer build featuring Jean as a physical damage primary DPS and Beidou as her core support. If you liked this video, please leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on my future content. Jean is my favorite character in Genshin Impact, and if you would like to know more about her story, I recommend you check out my lore video on her here. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.